An emergency room is a place of controlled chaos. It is a sterile, brightly lit stage where science and the human body engage in a desperate, delicate dance. Every sound, every action, every procedure is part of a protocol, a system designed to impose order on the sudden, violent randomness of life and death. We put our faith in that order. We have too. But what happens when the chaos refuses to be controlled? What happens when the human body, the very thing they are trying to save, becomes the source of an inexplicable terror? On the evening of February 19th, 1994, in a hospital in Riverside, California, that system broke down completely. A patient was brought in, and in her final moments, she unleashed something that defied all logic, turning a sterile ER into a biohazard zone, and leaving a legacy not of answers, but of a single, haunting, and impossible question. Her name was Gloria Ramirez. She was 31 years old, a mother of two, living with the quiet, daily struggle of late-stage cervical cancer. When the paramedics brought her into the General Hospital ER, she was in extreme distress. Her heart was beating dangerously fast, her breathing was shallow, and her mind was confused. The medical team did what they had done 1,000 times before. They were a well-oiled machine, moving with speed and precision to save a life. But as they worked, the first strange note in a terrifying symphony began to play. A nurse noticed an unusual, oily sheen covering Gloria's skin. Then a fruity, almost garlicky odor began to emanate from her mouth. It was strange, but in an ER, strange as a baseline. They continued. A nurse named Susan Kane drew blood from Gloria's arm. She immediately noticed something was wrong. An acrid, ammonia-like smell rose from the vial. She passed it to a respiratory therapist, Maureen Welch, who confirmed it. This wasn't normal. A medical resident, Julie Gorkinski, leaned in to look closer. She saw something impossible in the syringe. Small, manila-colored particles floating in the blood, like tiny crystals. And that's when the known world began to fall apart. Susan Kane, the nurse who first drew the blood, was the first to fall. She complained of a burning sensation on her face and then collapsed to the floor. Julie Gorkinski, the resident who saw the crystals, was next. She felt lightheaded, nauseous, and then she too fainted. Maureen Welch, the respiratory therapist, began to have trouble breathing. She collapsed. One by one, staff members in the trauma room began to fall ill. Dizziness, nausea, burning skin, shortness of breath, even temporary paralysis. Panic erupted. This was no longer a medical emergency, it was a contamination event. The hospital declared an internal emergency. All patients were evacuated from the ER into the parking lot. A small team, struggling with their own symptoms, heroically stayed behind to try and save Gloria, but her heart had given out. At 8:50 p.m., Gloria Ramirez was pronounced dead. Her body was immediately moved into an isolated room. The ER that had just been a hub of frantic, life-saving activity was now a ghost town, cordoned off, silent, and terrifying. That night, 23 of the 37 ER staff members experienced at least one symptom. 5 were hospitalized. The scene was treated like a chemical spill. A county hazmat team was called in. They swept the ER in full protective gear, searching for nerve agents, poison gas, any known toxin that could explain the bizarre, cascading illness. They found nothing. The air was clean. The hospital was safe. The only source of the phenomenon was the body of Gloria Ramirez herself. The initial explanation offered by health officials was as strange as the event itself: mass hysteria. They suggested that the strange odor had triggered a panic, a chain reaction of psychosomatic symptoms among an overworked and stressed out staff. To the doctors and nurses who had fallen ill, this diagnosis was more than just a theory. It was an insult. They were medical professionals, trained to handle stress. They knew what they had felt. The burning skin, the breathing difficulties, the fainting. That wasn't panic. That was exposure. The mystery deepened. Who was Gloria Ramirez? And what had she brought with her into that hospital? The media dubbed her the Toxic Lady, a sensational, almost supernatural moniker. But she was a human being, and her family was left grieving, not only for her loss, but for the bizarre circus that now surrounded her death. They insisted the hospital was at fault, that some chemical spill or mishandling had led to this, and that their beloved Gloria was being posthumously blamed. The autopsy was one of the strangest in modern medical history. It was conducted by a team in full hazmat suits, yet even they could not find a definitive answer. The results were inconclusive. Her body held its secret close. For months, the case remained a scientific enigma, a medical ghost story told in whispers. And then a theory emerged from one of the most brilliant scientific facilities in the world, the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. They proposed a scenario, a chemical chain reaction so unlikely, so perfectly sequenced, it felt like something out of science fiction. But it was the only theory that fit all the bizarre, seemingly impossible facts. It begins with a substance called DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide. It's a powerful solvent that was, and still is, sometimes used as a home remedy for pain relief, especially by cancer patients. It's a degreaser, and if used on the skin, it could explain the oily sheen. It also has a distinct garlicky odor. The scientists at Livermore believed Gloria may have been using large amounts of DMSO to cope with the pain from her cancer. That was the first domino. When the paramedics gave Gloria oxygen, it would have saturated her blood and combined with the DMSO, creating a new compound, dimethyl sulfone, or DMSO2. This is a substance that, at low temperatures, forms crystals. The manila-colored crystals seen in Gloria's blood. That was the second domino. The third and final domino was the defibrillator. As the medical team administered electric shocks to try and restart her heart, the electricity, they theorized, would have transformed the harmless DMSO2 into something terrifying, dimethyl sulfate, or DMSO4. Dimethyl sulfate is a highly toxic, powerful chemical poison. It's a man-made compound used in industrial manufacturing. It is readily absorbed through the skin, and when inhaled, its vapor can cause convulsions, paralysis, and delirium. The symptoms it produces are a near-perfect match for what the ER staff experienced. The theory was that the shocks turned her blood into a chemical weapon, which then aerosolized in the room, a cool gas that was inhaled by the staff closest to her. It was a perfect, terrible storm, a 1 in a billion chemical cascade, turning a human body into the source of a toxic event. But it remains just that, a theory, a compelling, elegant theory, but one that has never been definitively proven. There are still holes. Why didn't every single person in the room get sick? Why wasn't the chemical found during the autopsy? The DMSO theory is the ghost of an explanation, a plausible narrative for an event that otherwise makes no sense. The human cost, however, was very real. Julie Gorshinsky, the resident who was the most severely affected, suffered from bone decay in her knees and had to use crutches for months. The other staff members carried the psychological trauma for years. And the Ramirez family never accepted the DMSO theory, believing it was an attempt to shift blame onto Gloria. In the end, we are left in the borderlands, somewhere between a scientific explanation and an unknowable mystery. The story of Gloria Ramirez is a profound and humbling reminder that for all our knowledge, for all our technology, the human body is still a universe of secrets. It can act in ways we cannot predict or explain. She walked into that hospital a patient and left it a legend, a medical ghost whose story challenges the very limits of our understanding. So what do you believe? Was this a case of mass hysteria, a psychological phenomenon born of stress and a strange smell? Or was it a 1 in a billion chemical reaction that turned a dying woman into a temporary toxic event? I would be fascinated to hear your interpretation of this bizarre and tragic mystery. Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and support our channel. Thanks for watching.